Anyway,
there's loads of stuff we could talk about on this episode. As I said, it's not only all the playoffs, mate. Even the LEC one has some mad bit. I mean, the Carmine Corp didn't make the
there's tons to talk about.
The amount of storylines, there's too many good ones. There's too many good ones.
But first, we have to talk about LCK All Pro because it just fucking tilts me so hard. I spoke about this with Wolf on the Monty and Wolf show before the actual All Pro came out. And I think it is just fucking egregious once again. So, put this up for you guys. We have 4 out of the 5 members of Gen.G are in the first team All-Pro. And the only one who didn't make it was Lehens, who was...
Even that melts my fucking brain, bro, because 1, he was your MVP last split, so you thought he was the shit in KT. And then 2, if the whole thing we're doing is the number 1 team gets all 5 players, then it makes no sense to put 4 and then go, but wait a minute, that'd be ridiculous to put them all. And then it's like, what's mad about that is that's almost like the fuck you Lehens vote. Like, what even is that? Because when we get into this, mate, it doesn't, the biggest problem with this one specifically, is there's no rhyme or reason. The logic on the last 2 went, whoever's number 1 just gets all 5. I at least if it's consistent money, even if I don't like it, I can at least get the premise. I have no idea how this was calculated. It doesn't even make sense to me, mate.
I will say, special shout out to Atlas, who by not putting Lehens in his top 3 actually prevented Lehens from getting into the first place. So it was nearly all 5, but shout out to Atlas, who actually put Carrier, then Barrel, and then Delight, so that Lehens did not get into first team All Pro.
By the way, even though we're joking about this, obviously Lehens probably shouldn't have been first. Like, I actually do think Carrier should be the one that you put there.
Yes.
I think that's totally fair. I mean, the problem obviously becomes, why aren't the other positions allowed to fucking change? Because the idea the other 4 are all the best is like, really?
The idea, Thorin, the idea that Peyz, who is the worst player on Gen.G, is better than Viper is so fucking ridiculous. I can barely contain it. Like, this is, look, I get your arguments for Keen. First off, as I discussed with Wolf, Keen is a very strong candidate compared to Zeus, right? But I probably would have put Zeus first. I probably would have done Zeus, Canyon, Chovy, Viper, Carry.
The problem you have with the Zeus one, I'll tell you right now, Monty, is this. As someone who's not only like followed esports, but I've always done the meta parsing of what people think about esports, the meta contextual. Right, I'll tell you right now, the number 1 problem you have if you're Zeus is a lot of his really amazing games were at the beginning of the split, and no one remembers the beginning of the split. They just remember the last like 3 weeks, and so that was when they weren't even playing the top as much. So I think sadly people have just forgotten how long the split is. Like, he was really good at the beginning, mate. He was a monster.
So the arguments for Zeus are, yes, he was a monster. Secondly, that he was blind picking a lot, and he was blind picking Aatrox. Everybody knew he was going to do it, and yet he was like, I think he won his first 9 games of the split on Aatrox before he lost. And he was just really consistent. So even though it was predictable, the answer for Keen is like, Keen has been arguably, Keen has a very high counter pick rate. He has like the highest counter pick rate among LCK top laners, and so he's getting a lot of favorable matchups because that's the way that Gen.G wants to play their draft. The thing about Zeus is he was blinding a lot so that they would get other players favorable matchups, right? And he was still dominating, still looking insane on the Aatrox. So I think it really depends on what you value. And I think Zeus really does have a very good claim to being, first team All-Pro. They played very different styles within their team. So it's just, I personally prefer Keen, but Keen also had some bad games, right? And was more of like a Cassante Udyr merchant for the most part. So, I mean, I think both of them had really good splits. And to your point, Thorin, the reason why I think people are voting for Peyz now is because they forgot what happened in the first part of the split, which is Peyz and Lehens were bad in lane, guys. Like, in the early game, Peyz and Lehens laning was a huge weakness for Gen.G. And that is the reason why, when they played against T1, T1 was first picking Lucian in those games, is because they thought they were just going to roll over the bot lane and then use that as the ticket to victory. Now, that didn't happen, and credit to Peyz and Lehens, the laning phase did get, shape up. But Viper has been a player who has been consistent throughout the entire split. He has moved with the meta better than Gumayusi or Peyz. Peyz was kind of bad early and good later. Gumayusi was kind of good early and worse later, right? And you could say Carrier, yeah, he's fallen off a little bit, but you guys are forgetting like the total domination he had in the early and middle parts of the split. And you also have to think about which of these players are contributing the most to their team's success and their team's style. And without Keria and Zeus, like T1 doesn't work. Like they just don't fucking work as a team. Whereas, I mean, we literally saw Ruler get subbed out for Peyz and Gen.G still be functional. And I think that Peyz is very good, and I think he does deserve top 3 All Pro, but he hasn't had the same level of burden to carry because his solo laners are Keen and Chovy, guys. Look at Viper. He's got fucking Zeka, who is like trash for a lot of this split. Did get better recently again. Recency bias says Zeka's been performing pretty well. And Thorin. Like, give me a fucking break. Like, Viper has Atlas, he has the weight of the world. He's Atlas with the world on his shoulders on this fucking HLE team, and he's been great the entire time. He's been great on a variety of champions. He's been great in the different metas. So it's pretty ridiculous that we could have 3 teams that are very close in terms of record at the top of the standings, and we don't have any Hanwha players in the top in any of the top positions. Seems crazy.
I mean, I think this is actually one of the most egregious ones I've seen in years, because I will reiterate the principle I always explain when it comes to these awards, because I think it's very much lost. The reason why, Monty, I actually hate the thinking that exists. This is essentially what they do in both the NFL and the NBA, which is you're not actually picking the best players at their position. You're picking from the top-ranked teams which players look like they're the best at their position. And if you can't see the distinction there, you're going to miss the whole point of what I'm saying here, because what I hate about this is, you know what actually tells you how good teams are? The league table. Do you know what tells you who the best team is? The fucking championship final. You don't need to vote on those things. The game takes care of that for us. So when we do, by definition, an individual award, we're only judging you as an individual. We're not judging what your team did. That doesn't make any sense. We're looking at your play and how good you are. And by the way, this is why individual awards are brilliant, Monty. This is why all pro awards are brilliant. Because you know this, if you are in the NFL and you are Barry Sanders, it doesn't matter that the GM of the Lions can't make a team that can win the NFL. You are so good that when people watch you, they might actually even say, this guy's even better than Emmitt Smith, who's on the actual champion Cowboys. I think he's just better individually. Now, the analogy here would be if the LCK fans and, media and coaches and pros voted for the NFL, Barry Sanders would never have had a single individual accomplishment ever in his whole career. They would have treated him like a fucking bum because he never made the playoffs. And they would have given Emmitt Smith everything constantly, 24/7, as though he was the greatest ever and no debate, right? Because in this particular scenario, if you are Viper, right, one of the saddest things is, this is why, Monty, the incentives are fucked in esports. The genius is, if you actually treated this individual award as, I'm going to reward the best individual player at ADC, then there's a world, right, where first of all, Viper would probably be first pro team like this, right? So he'd get first team, even though his team itself is in third, right? And he'd even be an MVP candidate. You know what amazing incentive that is for an individual player? It means if you're a truly great player and you go to a team that doesn't wind up being the best, just ball out, dude. If you ball out at the end, we'll still give you your award. We'll say, you know what, mate? It's not your fault that Hanwha Life couldn't get better players. It's not your fault Zeka can't players here. You know what? Fuck it. You get your award. There's your MVP. There's your first team All Pro. And at least history will remember your team wasn't the best, but you were. You were fucking cracked. No. Instead, as you say, we're not even, by the way, the Peyz isn't even debatable. Because as you said, he's not even important on his own team. He wasn't particularly good. Half the people, by the way, voting for this guy must have been the ones who were underrating him last year as well. Like the idea, he's not even some like legacy name. Meanwhile, Viper is so cracked. And this is where I know you can't win against idiots. Because I've seen people just comment on like the lost games or the times that Hanwha obviously got beaten by the top teams, didn't they? Because they themselves weren't that good and they got a fluke win at the end. Doesn't matter though. His team is worse. Like he's also, of all the roles to play, guys, you cannot 1v9 from ADC from minute 1 in the game. It's the only carry role that it is impossible to just win the game. I mean, you can't even get through a fucking lane on your own. You have a second player there. And the maddest part about this logic is this. It's even worse than you think, guys. They are actually saying the collective intelligence of the LCK is telling you Peyz is not only the best ADC, his support isn't even that good. I can't even take this, mate.
It's
They
not even
told you that. It's even stupider than the original premise of just him being the best.
It's not even that. So Chovy is rightfully, by the way, Thor, and here's something they got right. Chovy's the MVP of the split. That is 100% accurate. He was the only candidate. Yeah, it was anybody but Chovy would have been actually just like a war crime. So I mean, I guess. So what you're telling me is that Viper, the dude that literally had to play with Zeka's Corki for multiple games where he was actively running it down, Viper is winning games with Zeka's Corki. And meanwhile, Peyz is winning games with Chovy as the MVP of the entire league. And somehow Chovy is the better player. And here's what's even crazier, Thorin, is that we had the classic. Almost all of the commentators and analysts on the Korean side voted all of Gen.G into first team All Pro. Cloud Templar.
Classic.
Nofe. Pony. Gogo. And here's the other thing. All the players did this as well. Faker. Coma. Dandy. Peanuts. Supreme.
Faker confirmed fucking pleb, by the way. Faker is a fucking pleb. Or he just doesn't say what he actually thinks. Because, by the way, what's mad about that is, you know this, Monty. I even know why they do this. The way that the Korean culture works is very collectivist. And they're thinking, even if you're a pro or a coach, goes like this. It goes, whoever won and was number one, they all must have done their job. That's the logic.
Yes,
By the way,
they are the best players because the best players have the best teamwork. So ergo, they are the best.
Here's the sad thing about it, though, Monty. If you're not giving an award, actually, as like an actual philosophy, it's a great philosophy to get everyone to pull together and to work together and to not worry about who the star is and to just it is actually a brilliant way to like run a society. The problem is you can't then give awards. Like these awards are by definition in bad faith. They're disingenuous. Like it doesn't make any sense to say that. It's why actually, if you don't understand, guys, you know when Chovy had never won LCK and he used to say all those weird comments after every final, like he essentially sort of like almost sounded like he was blaming himself, like I'm just not good enough and I need to win. Like what people don't get about that is like Koreans to have that mindset of like you either win for real or it doesn't count. They don't want to hear the stuff I just said about Viper, like, but you were the best, mate, even though you were in the third. They don't want to hear that. They want to go like, look, when I win, I'll win, and when I didn't, I didn't. Like that, which again, for a pro player, great mindset. It'll get you to the top. It'll mean you won't give up. You won't do what we would do in the West, which is in the West you would swag like, you know what, I'm fucking sick with these dickhead teammates, what they do. You won't do that. So again, in like just a general everyday sense, I actually think it's a great philosophy to have. The problem is when you go judge an award and you say the award is individually who is each of the best players, then you're just being an idiot at that point in time. You know what I mean? Like you're just not doing what it says on the tin, are you? What are we doing?
I think what's so crazy to me is looking at the list of the people who voted. There were only 2 people on the team side, Thorin, that voted for Viper as first team All Pro. So all of the Western casters basically did it, but actually all the Western casters except for Hooney voted Viper first team. The only 2 people on the team side were Lehens, who voted Viper instead of Peyz. Which he couldn't vote for his own teammates, so he had to. He had to, guys. He had to.
Yeah, you have to.
But the one person besides him who could have voted for Peyz was based CV Max, who voted Zayas Canyon, Chovy, Viper, Carrier, which is what I would have voted. So shout out CV Max.
I told you, because by the way, Monty, if people don't know, I'll give you a little extra secret that people don't know about why I ride with CV Max. Because, bro, I get crazy Reapered vibes from him, where you know how it is. The whole thing is, if they were actually smart in Korea, guys, Reapered would have been one of the coaches that led them all to World Cup, but they didn't, because the whole thing was he wasn't a super collectivist figure who was willing to let his boss take all. He was the guy where it's like, hey, I'm the thinker. He was an individualist, essentially. He's very much more. That's why actually America's the perfect place for him.
Is not very Korean.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
So to me, CV Max has that same vibe, mate. I get this vibe of like he's actually willing to step out of the group think, and he's willing to have the balls to say, I don't agree with this. I'm going to go a different route, even if it's unpopular. By the way, I've got a couple of things to throw in here as well. One, I'm just going to say this right now. You know, I love this, Monty. One of my little fucking kinks in esports is exposing people I think are frauds. So you know how every commentator in the West promises you they watch LCK religiously because they're all going to try and get that fucking Worlds final, aren't they, Monty? If it's Gen.G against fucking T1, they want to be on that and then present to the audience that they know these teams and can really talk about them authoritatively. But the problem is you slip up every now and then. And if you know how like an episode of like fucking Sherlock or Monk works, I don't actually need to investigate this. I can just look at what you say and infer from it what you're thinking. So here's how it goes. You know how it's been years now, Monty, since they got rid of that stupid system where the MVP used to just be the player with the most player of the game awards, right? Hence why BDD won it a million times, because as I always said, if he was on a top team, he would always play Azir, his jungler would play Lee Sin, he would get rolling, and he would just win the award every time because it looked like the Azir carried the game and did the most damage. So famously, they changed that, and then as a result, you got to have people like the Chovies of the world win the MVP, right? But now, what they did is they didn't get rid of it completely because they still wanted to play the game. So instead, they made 2 awards, didn't they? They made MVP, and then they made Player of the Split. And Player of the Split still is most player of the games, and MVP is just voted on, right? This is where Azel, good old friend who I have totally admitted is one of the only people in esports I hate view, he came along, even though funny thing is I actually respect his esports career. I just think he says consistently the most boneheaded, American-centric things about esports that make no sense if you actually didn't live just in the puddle that is LCS. But because he wants to pretend to be a global figure watching the whole game, he came along, and this split, guys, was essentially like, what's this like player of the split and MVP? So first of all, you obviously haven't been watching LCK, but you didn't watch the last years. I can tell you straight up, that's been there the whole time. So one, that's mad suspicious. What? I'm supposed to believe you watched all these broadcasts and followed the whole thing. He never found out about these awards. Then secondly, he then tried to infer, right? Player of the split, surely the MVP is the player. Oh, you like logical consistency, motherfucker. Well, you know what? I don't think so, Monty, but I'm pretty sure Azale wasn't actually in LCS in like 2017, right? I think he came later than that, didn't he?
No, I think he was there by 2017.
Was he there in 2017?
Yeah,
Someone look that up, because all I'll say is this. People might not know this, but are you ready? So his concept he can't understand is, how could you be the player of the split, which by the way infers best player, not most valuable, but the other guy is the most valuable. He's acting like those are the same thing. Well, then let me put a piece of logic before you, dickhead. So if I was to vote all the players in the league who are the best at their position, Monty, and I gave the best mid laner of LCS to Jensen, then logically, another mid laner couldn't be the MVP of the league, right? But it was in the LCS. Jensen was first team All Pro LCS Season 7 Summer mid laner. So that means Idiot said he's the best mid laner in the game. And then when asked who was the best player, they went, Bjergsen, of course. That happened in your league, homie. That was your league. Your league did exactly what they're doing now in 2024 back in the day. And you know what? It's even a banger reference because Jensen relevant as fuck right now still, isn't he? By the way, that video I did a few years ago aged like fucking absolute fine wine, where I said the only way Jensen's ever allowed to win in the minds of fans is he has to actually lift the trophy. Every second before that, he's never as good. He's always just washed. And then he just has to lift the trophy again, as he has done a bunch of times. But anyway, I thought that was a fun one because it did sort of show to me, like, are you even following this league, mate? That's actually embarrassing to tweet, mate. Like, what's mad is, I'll guarantee he even has mutuals in the LCK. Just fucking DM them privately, like, because he made it sound like they just invented this now, mate. This has been around for a while. If you don't know, last split, it was like, I think it was like fucking Chovy was like the MVP, and then Canyon was the player of the split. If people remember when he was on, like,
MVP of split up. Last split, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, which one am I thinking of then? Maybe I'm thinking of like 2 years ago then. Maybe I'm thinking of 2022, could be, whatever. But anyway, there've been ones where they were split and it wasn't, this time it was Chovy for both. But that was the point anyway to make, is that actually, the joke is Chovy even won on both ends in the LCK to bring it back. Monty, he's the MVP, which he is. And obviously he's the player of the game all the time because he just is the player of the game, isn't he? So that's even one of the rare times they got that one right.
Yeah.
Which also is why he's the MVP 100%, by the way, because if anything, in his team, there should have been loads of shared player of the games, but it's just Chovy in it again. He's just the fucking best. Even on a stacked team, he is the best.
Yeah. I mean, I think Chovy has been really amazing this split. He's played 16 different champions. He has been incredibly dominant. He's actually been roaming a lot more. He's picked up a lot of the shot calling duties on Gen.G. So I think it's almost inconceivable. Like, he's clearly the #1 mid laner. And even though Faker did have a good split, and I think Faker does deserve #2. But it's very difficult to say an MVP could be anybody but Chovy. And unfortunately, Thorin, if we actually have to start talking about most valuable player to their team, then we have to start talking about Viper, because Viper is another candidate
course.
for the
He'd
MVP
be my
role.
second one, mate. After Chovy, he would be my second one. Because
Yes.
why not? What you have to ask is this: it's the other way around, mate. This is why the individual award should be judged differently from teams. Because I think the only reason Hanwha Life was in third and actually was able to win games off those
It's
top teams
entirely
is
true.
because of this fucking guy. Go watch the set. This guy had to do everything. And by the way, that's why I said earlier I get mad when they point out games he lost. Mate, I have seen this guy, this split, have nightmare fuel games where it's like the worst solo queue game ever for an ADC, and nothing you could do could ever get you out of like a team fight. Like I've seen someone say, and by the way, he's even won some of those team fights that I thought were impossible. That's how cracked this guy is.
He also plays a very selfless style. Like he doesn't play for KDA, which is also very impressive. So if you guys go back and watch their final game of the split, which was versus D+, he's playing Lucian. And the thing about Lucian is that in some of these compositions, so D+ is like running, single target lockdown, basically. So what happens in these games is that he's playing as you do when you play Lucian in the East. You play it very far forward, trying to get a lot of poke damage down, right? And what we see is that on some of these compositions where we've got like Vi, Ari, right, who are trying to single target CC somebody. Meanwhile, on Hanwha Life, they have Gnar, Maokai, Yone, and Nami. So what happens is Viper will dash forward, culling, or do a lot of damage with like rapid fire cannon and static shiv, right? And he will then just get ulted or charmed. He'll get Vi ulted or charmed. They'll use all their resources on killing Viper. And then what happens is the counter engage with Tidal Wave, with Maokai ult, with Yone ult, just completely decimates D+. So effectively, Viper is playing correctly in this game, and he's doing a huge amount of damage. And the choice he's giving D+ is you can either use all your cooldowns on me, and then we counter engage onto you with much more AoE CC, or I just get to poke you for free. And so D+, chose to engage on him, but they lost team fights as a result. Viper ends game 1, 3-4-11 on Lucian. You might be like, that's not a great scoreline. If you watch him play, he plays Lucian incredibly well in this game, and he passes the eye test like a motherfucker. But the thing about Viper is he's not a KDA player. He is literally he knows what his job is, and he's doing his fucking job. And when he dies, all of D+ die in response. And it's just a great, I think this is one of the things that is really good about Hanwha Life. And again, credit to Peanut's shot calling, is that they have very clear ideas as a team of how their team fights and win conditions are going to play out. And you really see it beautifully in the D+ series.
By the way, that's even sort of genius if you think about it, because it's almost like the analogy is think of like a team sport. It's like he's just drawing the double team so his teammates open. He just gives them a chance by intentionally bringing the attention.
Yes. Yeah, basically. And here's the thing, Thorin. We also obviously have to run the mental experiment, which is what happens if Viper is on Gen.G instead of Peyz? And the answer is Gen.G is better.
And go the other way around. Put Peyz on Hanwha Life and let's see him have a nice split, shall we? They'd be fucking, the joke is they'd probably be like fourth or something, wouldn't they? We're talking about with nothing.
like Viper on Gen.G makes Gen.G.
That would be sexy as fuck, by the way. Imagine that. It's why I said earlier, by the way, how's that aged? Where I said to T1, remember what I said in the off-season, Monty, right after they won Worlds? I said I would do a Belichick, mate. I'd still upgrade. I'd get Viper in. I'd get fucking Canyon in as like a jump goal. As usual, I know nothing. So enjoy Owner and Gumayushi, dickheads. I'll see you in the finals.
It's like the Griffin reunion on that team at that point in time, right? With Chovy and Viper and Lehens. So, but imagine at their current skill levels, that would be one of the most super teams to ever exist. The thing that is preventing Gen.G from being even more of a super team is Peyz, guys. It's Peyz. He's the worst player on this roster. I'm not saying he's bad. He's not bad. He's very good.
No, so let's be real. We were fine with them keeping him because he was really good last year. Here's the problem. It sometimes happens. You know the concept, Monty. It's why they call it the difficult sophomore album, because the logic goes every band's first album's good. That's why you heard of them. But the second one's trickier. You have to reinvent yourself. His problem is he just didn't make it into the second year as good as he was in the first. He was kind of he looked awesome that first year. Not as good now.
So what was ridiculous was last summer I had to go on an anti-Peyz campaign for MVP because I was hearing rumors that people were actually thinking about voting him for MVP before KT finished stronger at the end of the split, right? Before KT was in first place. And my argument is that Peyz never actually has to do the hard work of carrying the game himself. He's great as he's a janitor. He cleans up. And that's fine. Like, he can be a janitor. He can be a Zeri player who just, cleans up team fights.
This team, it really is to be like a prey type character. Yeah, but the others carry.
But my question was, what happens when Peyz has the resources and the rest of his team is down? And we saw that at the end of summer, and it's been a long time. He might have gotten better, but we haven't really had to see that with Gen.G. Like, my question is, what happens when Chovy and Keen are down and Canyon doesn't have pressure and Peyz has 3 kills? Does he carry that game? Because I can tell you right now, Gen.G didn't win those games last year. They did not win those games when Peyz had to step up and be the carry. I've seen Viper win those games. I've seen Ruler win those games. You know what I mean? And he's a very good young player, but I need to see him ascend to the next level to be that star. And I think a lot of the Koreans are desperate to make this guy another superstar. Like, they are pushing the Peyz narrative so hard. And I think there is a fear amongst like the Korean people in the scene that all of the superstars are like kind of getting old and we haven't had any new blood, right, in a long time that has ascended to like real superstar status. And so they really want Peyz to be that thing, right? And when he's winning all the time, like he did last year and this year, it's very easy. It's a lot harder to say, oh, well, we've got Lucid and Perfect and Bull who are all on like mid-table teams, and say like, oh, this is going to be the next superstar player. So I just don't think Peyz has a very hard job in Gen.G.
The most boring thing about this when it comes to awards for individual players, Monty, is 2 obvious things to mention. 1, teams don't have unlimited salary. Therefore, all the best players don't play in all the best positions in the number 1 team. That's just an obvious concept anyone can understand right now. And then the other one is this. First of all, you don't tend to make super teams of the best players in all positions because they don't really work in terms of in-game balance. In every single team, logically, Monty, one of the 3 traditional carry roles isn't hardcore carrying. So whether it's top or AD, usually, it's very rarely mid. Shout out to fucking BDS. But it's usually obviously top or AD, depending on how you play. So in that scenario, assuming we all understand that's how League of Legends is played, you can't say all 3 are the best. Like, how do the other teams have a chance if this is the logic? I've never understood that part either. You're the number 1 team with all the best players. Well, why aren't they just murking the whole league unbeaten then? What are you talking about?
Yeah, and here's the other problem with the logic that's happened recently is that, so for example, Keria is first team All Pro. 3 players, Zeus, Owner, and Faker, are second team All Pro. And Gumayushi is third team All Pro with the rest of Hanwha. But Hanwha beat T1 kind of convincingly. So what you're telling me is that no Hanwha players are first team All Pro, but T1s are. 3 are second team, but only 1 of Hanwha. And then it's just Guma and 4 Hanwha players on all LCK third team. So tell me, explain to me, if this is true, how they beat Hanwha. Explain. Somebody please, T1 fans, please explain to me how this happened. Because,
by the way, I'm actually low-key sad now that you told me that thing about Atlas, and I know there's a world where they would have had. Think about this, Monty. They would have had, if he hadn't voted for that, then the second team All-Pro would be T1 with Vipo, and I would have been able to do the tweet I wish I could do, which is so a better version of T1 then, which is all I wanted. That's all I wanted to do. That would be my tweet immediately. Of course.
But like, so, and I, the funny thing is that T1 fans have to wrestle with this in their mind, which is either you must admit that Hanwha has better teamwork and better shot calling than T1, or better drafting, or like that's the only option because they don't have better players. I guess they just don't. You're saying that like, and here's the other problem. Okay, so you say, well, Viper is just a huge carry and like he was the one. So if that's the case, if Viper's like beating all of T1, why is he not first team All Pro? Because Peyz wasn't clapping your cheeks. T1, well, he kind of was actually. Peyz kind of did clap their cheeks, but
I mean, everyone clapped them in that game. But yeah, true.
Peyz was much better than I think T1 anticipated in that series, and credit to Peyz. But Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
I'm with you, mate. If you just two, I actually think the other one's more effective. The problem with the one of like, if you put Viper on Gen.G is we know they'd be way better, but to the father, but they already won anyway. I think it's the other one. I don't think you could. This is why I know he's the best. There is no other ADC you could put on Gen.G. So, for example, the joke is they have made the third team Gen.G, but with Gumayushi instead. If Gumayushi was instead of Viper on Gen.G, they wouldn't be in the position they're in. Like they again. By the way, I'm just going to say it right now. Any ADC that's in LCK now plays on Hanwha Life instead of Viper, and it wouldn't even be the stratification you have. It would be T1 and Gen.G at the top, and then it would be Hanwha, KT, and D plus shitters in that fucking middle area, and they would all just lose random games and win random. It wouldn't even, like, Hanwha Life's whole stability was this guy. He's the one player every game you knew would turn up.
Right. And like, there's just a lot of other questions about this too. So Owner has been the worst player on T1.
Fuck. Horse.
And especially in, I mean, he got like mega clapped by Peanut in their last series, and he got mega clapped by Canyon in their last series versus Gen.G. And so what you're telling me is that Owner is better than Peanut, when Owner basically, if his bot lane isn't winning, actually can't do anything in the jungle. But Peanut, who has to play with way worse teammates, especially solo lanes, well, you know, and has better pathing than Owner, I guess, like, that doesn't mean anything, and is shot calling. So I know Peanut hasn't had the best split. Like, that's just straight up true. Like, I'm not saying.
Yeah, look at his teammates. Look at his solo lanes, for fuck's sake.
I mean, he's always had Doran, so he's used to that one. But
True, but even so, come on, mate.
I mean, Doran often
these are really questions I almost think should be principles to think about. We almost should write a guide for how to think about how to do this award voting, Monty. Like, I'll give you an example, as you just said there. Are you voting for the jungler? What are his solo laners? Because all I'll say is compare Peanut solo laners to the other people in contention for these fucking roles. The other people have, like, the people who are the best in the world at those roles. He doesn't even have the best LCK fucking players in the solo lanes. What are we talking about here?
I mean, there's also a lot of other questions that we could bring up, Thorin, such as, you know, KT had a 60% win rate. They were 11-7 at the end of the season. Are you telling me there are no KT players within the top 3 roles? They also beat Gen.G, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, guys, look, I hate this iteration of KT. I fucking hate them. But even I will say that, like, BDD probably should be in the conversation for third team All Pro. Like, is Pyosik better than Owner? That's a true question. Like, Pyosik's had some stinker games, but he's also had some mega hard carry games, and he is more crucial to KT's success. And to, you know, honestly, maybe Beryl. Again,
even
like,
Beryl might actually deserve that third team one. I agree. He just actually might. Maybe decide he might actually deserve it. He wasn't bad.
I hate to say it, but you know, there are players that we can at least have conversations about. Showmaker hasn't been good. I mean, his Tristana games recently were miserable, but Showmaker has also been the only good thing about this D+ roster for the most part of this.
We'll say, Monty, I also do think if we're going to go through all 3, why is Zekka on there?
So
I'm missing something.
Again, it's recency bias. It's recency bias, Thorin. So recently,
God, the first few weeks he was complete ass.
I mean, I don't like Zekka on this list because I remember the Corky times, and, like, the Corky times disqualify him from being in any of the All Pro teams.
I agree with you. Again, if this is about celebrating individual success, and we're even trying to almost say, like, hey, Viper, not your fault, my life sucks. Actually, wouldn't that be the perfect one? Hey, BDD, I know KT wasn't that good this split, but hey, at least you were better than Zekka, or had better teammates than you. But instead, we don't. We give the opposite incentive. Fuck you, BDD. You weren't on the top 3 teams.
I mean, the crazy thing is that Zekka won a bunch of those Corky games where he was playing like complete shit because the rest of his team just dragged his lame-ass corpse across the finish line. His control mage play was really bad, guys. Like, his last couple of Talia games have been really good, and credit to him. But a lot of his, you know, games from earlier this split were quite terrible. And I just have a long memory, and, like, I think that Zekka's performance has been very uneven, but he ended strong, so there's bias, right? There's bias there. But I think BDD, for me, BDD probably would be my third All Pro vote. And also, a lot of people did actually vote him third team All Pro, to be fair.
Oh, fair play.
They did. A lot of people did. But yeah, I mean, Zekka has been good in the last couple weeks, but he, you know, early mid split, he was atrocious. He was just really bad in a lot of games. And honestly, Thorin, if we had to criticize somebody, like the reason why Hanwha is probably not above T1 in the table is because of Zeka.
Oh, of course. Remember, he plays the most influential fucking position in the game.
It has to be somebody's fault.
This thing is, I mean, we've made this point 1 million times. Think about this, Monty. We spent the whole split saying, look, I'll take Scout even in his current form, bring him back, just bring him fucking over to Korea. Like, it's a waste of time, innit? What a fucking world. What a world.
That said, I think, Hanwha has a very good shot of beating T1 later in these playoffs.
Certainly going to be spicy.
It's going to be a fun one because that's almost certainly going to happen. Because Hanwha plays Kwangdong. Hanwha will crush Kwangdong.
And crucially, this is the thing, Monty. I've already realised, because it's happened 3 times in a row, that they're not, even if Gen.G beats T1, the T1 idiot's still going to go, doesn't look like anything to me. So now I need their punishment to be more severe. I need them to lose to Hanwha. Like, it's why before I wanted them to lose to KT just for the historical reasons, like, fuck you. But actually, Hanwha would be funnier, mate. That would actually be it would be so funny if fucking Shitel Zeka beats Fake in the best of series again. But this time, it would be so fucking funny if that happened, mate. I actually don't, I low-key don't want it to happen. I actually think Gen.G T1 would be the better final. But just for the T1 fans, I do want it to happen.
Well, also, Doran and Peanut being T1's father until the end of time is also pretty funny.
Complete meme, I know. Yeah. Especially because Peanut obviously was on T1 and then all the T1 fans flamed him. How's that worked since then? It's won a few MVPs, give me a break. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.